Well, Skid Row cleanups are perhaps coming to a halt, or at least they're going to be a lot more respective of property rights. Respectful of property rights. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, the folks on Skid Row just won a negotiating settlement with the city of Los Angeles because that area of the city has been subjected to sudden garbage cleanups where the city would come through and sanitation workers would pick up sofas and refrigerators and other large objects. And apparently, in the process of getting those pallets and other types of furniture out of the way, they've also confiscated other kinds of property belonging to homeless people. And now comes this settlement where the city agrees not only to give better notice about upcoming cleanups and to store the belongings of homeless people for a period of 90 days, allowing them to claim them. But
how much of my money are we going to give them?
I'm getting to that. But they've also agreed to pay the plaintiffs $645,000 in attorney fees, legal costs, and damages. This is not too far from where you live, Bill. What do you think of finally a little bit of justice for the homeless in Los Angeles?
For most of the time that I've lived in the city, I got here in 1988. I can only remember Skid Row being a place filled with homeless people, just lots of them. But in the last year or two, virtually every freeway overpass in the San Fernando Valley, any section of street, anything that's sheltered from direct rain, which we've actually had a little of out here in the winter, has not just got homeless people sleeping on the streets. We have tent cities. We have Hoovervilles here.
Can you explain what Hoovervilles are for our younger audience members, which means everybody?
Well, if you don't know, if you're under the age of 60 and you don't know what a Hooverville is, you need to get an education, young lad or lassie. Hoovervilles were cities that were built that basically just came together in Washington in the first years of the Great Depression when Herbert Hoover was president. And they were basically migrant tent cities filled with people that had no place to live, and most of them were in Washington so that they could see just how squalid life had become. Of course, that was back before we had a $70 trillion private property estimation in the United States, and people were living, pretty much half the country was living on dirt floors anyway or close to it, out on farms. So these, I call them Hoovervilles because they're not just people sleeping on the sidewalk. There are people who have made their homes tents, cities, with bicycles, barricades, supplies, all of it, under virtually every overpass in the San Fernando Valley, which is a good long way from downtown. Same is true for Santa Monica and most of these places as well. My experience with the homeless people that I've met, and I've talked to a few of them, is that to say that this is a housing problem it's just plain, it's not. Virtually everybody I met out there, I've met veterans, I've met people I liked very much, I met people I didn't like very much, and usually I talk to them if I get a chance to. And my experience has been that in virtually all of these cases, with the exception of what's been happening lately, virtually all of these cases are either addiction issues or mental health issues. What I'm seeing more of lately is I'm seeing more 20-something white kids who just look like they decided they'd rather sleep under an overpass than in mom and dad's house or something. It's a different group. It doesn't look, these people don't look, and there are not many of them that I have seen, but the ones that I have seen, I've seen a number of younger people who look perfectly healthy and perfectly capable of holding down a job, or at the very least filling out a welfare form and having a mailing address. And they're becoming more common too. I don't know whether or not it's a rebellion against something, whether they're looking for the glory of victimhood that comes with being a left winger. But the entire city has turned into Skid Row. Is what I'm trying to say, Scott. All of it. And the thing that really shocked me the most when my Russian wife came for the first time to L.A., and I was, needless to say, this is Los Angeles, you're out there in Russia, Siberia, but now you're in Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles is filthy, and she simply couldn't believe how much garbage there was on the sides of the chain link fences by the off ramps, and the condition of the road. She said the roads are better in Istanbul, they're better in Cairo. She's been to both of those places.
Well, Bill, it's not because the City of Angels is not trying. After all, Los Angeles spent some $31 million last year just to clean up these kinds of camps, and they haven't made any appreciable difference in the sordid conditions, according to the article I'm reading, of Skid Row. Meanwhile, the attorneys for the plaintiffs, in this case the homeless people, are saying that the city is using street cleanups and minor arrests as a pretext to seize and destroy homeless people's property. More than 2,000 people sleep in tents and lean-tos in this largest concentration of encampments in the country.
There's no question that the city got embarrassed by this trash pile that we talked about a few weeks ago. I said it's the only man-made object can be seen from space, and so here we have the result of progressive politics. Hold on to that thought for me because I always forget them. Let me just add one thing to this before I come back to this idea. Up in the top of the San Fernando Valley, up by Hanson Dam, Lakeview Terrace and Sunland, somewhere in that general neighborhood, there is a canyon, and there's a dirt road, and then there's like a trail that leads down into this like arroyo, where there may be some running water, and there are sometimes 200 or 300 people living there, and everybody's property is staked out. Everybody sleeps with one eye open. Everybody is constantly aware that somebody's going to come in full of meth or whatever. It's all kinds of assaults and stuff going on. These people live in the richest. Well, it's the poorest state in the union if you actually use debits and assets, but nevertheless, it is an entire Wild West, very primitive, violent, nasty city that lives just out of sight and has been there for a while. So this is the result of democratic policies and politics in the same way that we see that the democratic policies and politics that have governed exclusively now without a single Republican, Atlanta, Newark, Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, all of these places have been run for a century by people telling everybody how concerned they are about the poor and using that to jack up prices so that they can retire on $250,000 a year. And in a notable case, which I will never forget, I've forgotten his name, but there was I want to say it was a city commissioner in Detroit. And he got the city of Detroit to pay for a Lincoln, brand new Lincoln Navigator SUV for him. And he wanted that with the black leather seats. And so the city bought one, and the one that showed up had gray seats. And so he ordered a second one on the city dime and ordered $15,000, I think it was, to rush it so that he could get it there faster. And needless to say, not everybody is quite that flagrant about it, but that's basically how it works. And this is the destruction of California by these limousine liberals. It results in San Francisco, which I think you make a very strong case as if it's not the most beautiful city in America, in the world. People have to have apps to avoid the human excrement on the streets, and the entire center of the state is being basically shut down. Farmers are being driven off the land because of higher taxes and because they can't get any water because of a delta smelt, which is a sardine that lives upstream, and they're using that as an example, as a fig leaf, I should say, to cut off the water for the Central Valley and make sure that none of these farmers get to stay here anymore because they vote for Republicans. Not that it matters much here.
So, Bill, this is, to me, a conservative issue, I would think, because it has to do with property rights. So and let me just get to a specific question, and we have to wind it up here. But the settlement between Los Angeles and the homeless people living on Skid Row sets a different standard than is at play in the rest of the cities, where authorities have decided that homeless people who live in the streets can have as much property as they can fit into a 60-gallon container. And some civil rights attorneys believe that the 60-gallon limit is unconstitutional. Bill, as a conservative, What rights does an individual have to live on streets and sidewalks and under bridges built at public expense and do so in a way that negatively affects the property values of businesses and homes in the area?
I don't think, well, certainly they don't have any right to it. I'm pretty sure that there's nothing in the Constitution specifying the volume of household goods that you can own if you're camped out on somebody else's property. I'm reasonably sure that the founders did not set a number on that. So to say that they have no right to be there is to state the legal case without question. But it doesn't matter because it's not a legal issue. If this were a legal issue, they'd do what they did throughout most of American history, which is just go in there and, tell them to get out. And if they didn't, the cops would rough them up. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's what I'm saying their legal status is. And so it's not a legal issue. It's a moral issue. It's a guilt issue. And I will wrap this up quickly by saying that all of these policies that involve taking more money, sending it to the government, and then having it come down in the form of government aid does nothing but enrich bureaucrats and make the situation worse. And there is a way to solve this problem, although you will not be surprised to know that it's not something you can do by just throwing money at it. It's a much more difficult problem than that, and that's why we're not doing it, because it's difficult. I had a chance to get a guided tour of what was strangely enough called Welfare Square in Salt Lake City, which is run by the Mormons. And they take in homeless people whether they're Mormon or not. And they do two things with them that are absolutely important. One of them is the first thing they do is give them a job of some kind. They're working on the food canning assembly line, or so they're doing some kind of work on a daily basis, not in order to punish them, but so that when they go home at the end of the day, their paycheck is a reward for the work that they've done. It's their money, they earned it, and that gives them some sense of self-pride back. The other thing that they do is that they couple these people who are very, very dysfunctional in many cases with specific families that teach them how to cook, how to budget basic household expenses, have them over for dinner, basically adopt them out. And this has been remarkably successful, at least compared to these other government programs. And if we don't realize that this is the issue, we're not going to solve it. Now, I want to be crystal clear on this because I know sometimes I can be misunderstood about these things. There is no obligation on you. I'm just talking to you, general viewer. You are under no obligation, either moral or legal, to go out there and do something like that. You're under no moral obligation. You certainly should not be under any coercive obligation. You are a right to a free person. You have a right to your own life, and so on and so forth. But there are people who are born with the kind of nature, and you're one of them, Scott, who are willing to sacrifice their own time and their own money, and in some cases their own safety, because the idea of somebody being in that kind of pain is intolerable to them. But the idea of a bureaucracy feeling pain of somebody else it's a non sequitur. And so therefore what bureaucracies do is not charity. It's not based on either kindness or personal connection or anything. Nobody owns it. It is a way for us to cover up a problem that has largely been generated by ourselves through the closing of mental hospitals, because 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, people were saying it's not fair to keep these people in mental institutions. So they didn't. And now they're on the streets. I imagine they would have been better off in mental institutions from the state of the people that I've met on the streets.
Analyzing the news of the day from a conservative, principled perspective, Bill Whittle now comes to you 5 times a week thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who contribute monthly and annually to the sustenance of this enterprise. If you'd like to join their ranks and get in on the member blog, which you can not only read but write yourself.
600 plus posts now, you said, in what, a month, 2 months?
60 posts in several months that we've had that up so far, and our members have proven to be the citizen producers that we've always called them. If you'd like to join the group of citizen producers, go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.